I would like to tell a story about how fortunate I am as an individual, the way I was born and raised. I grew up in a family where my mother and my father always spoke Onkwehonwenéha. They didn't find it important, they didn't find it necessary to speak English. I don't remember talking English until I first had to go to school. But I was happy. I was a happy guy speaking. It always made my grandmother, my grandfather smile when I would greet them in our language. To say, how are you? Skana. Sego, skana. Even in our greetings, it says, now, are you at peace? Instead of saying hello, we say as a greeting to each other, now you are at peace. That's how we greet each other. That's how beautiful our language is. And so I was of the habit to speak in Onkwehonwenéha all the time. Even the non-Indians in my world at that time spoke in our language because they had to. We wouldn't speak to them in English, so they had to learn to say a few words in our language so that we could get along together. It's important. It's, my friends, it's the way you think. It's not just the language. It's not just vocabulary. It's the way you look at the world. It's the way you perceive all the natural beauties of the world. You say it, Onkwehonwenéha, it seems to be more beautiful. The grass is greener when you say it, Onkwehonwenéha. The flowers are more beautiful when you say it in Onkwehonwenéha. When you speak in our language, it's a fuller world. It's more intense as to the relationship we have with our natural world around us. It's and it's given to us from creation. We are a very fortunate people to have been receiving this gift of Onkwehonwenéha. And it was intended to be that way. We intended to speak in our language. Matter of fact, we're told that in our lifetime, there are three major things that we should constantly think about in our life. One of it is our language. Always carry that the best you can. Those of you who are just beginning to learn, consider it very carefully. That is who you are. It's not just the language you speak. That's who you are. That's what the Creator put you in this world, and He gave you that. So, have a good mind and learn the best way you can. Seek it out. Look for it. Don't wait for somebody to come and teach. You go out and try to learn it. So, I'm talking about the time when I was a real young. My father, my mother, oh, it was always beautiful. They would joke around, tease each other. They would honor each other by acknowledging each other about the beauty of their relationship. It was a full capacity of a beautiful relationship. And I saw it in my aunt. I saw it in my uncles. I saw it even, I'm fortunate enough to have saw it in my grandfather. Gaha was his name. And he was a beautiful man. He would speak always in Onkwehonwenéha. And he had this habit. He had this habit of singing Catholic hymns. He was very good at singing Catholic hymns. So you would hear him. He would leave the house to go to the barn, and he would be singing at the top of his lungs the Catholic hymns until he gets to the barn. You can tell about how far he's walking by the way he's singing his song. Sometimes he would have to go up the road. maybe go see somebody up the road in a rural area. We didn't live close, the houses weren't close together, so I would hear him walking away and I would hear him singing. He's singing in Indian, these Catholic hymns. He's singing in our language. So I could tell how far he's gone by the way he was singing. It brings me such a good memory to have that. Also, I was talking about when I first went to school. It was not nice. We did not have the instructions of to speak English, so it was a very difficult time. We couldn't understand why we had to speak in English. We were punished. We were harassed. We were strapped. We were put and stand in a corner for even just smiling in Indian. Can you imagine that? You smile in Indian in our way. It's amazing, but it's true. We would get punished. We would get harassed because, that's our nature. And when I went to school, everybody in my classroom spoke Onkwehonwenéha, except the teacher. So it was our natural habit that we would talk to one another, recess time or so it's out of the earshot of the teacher. We wouldn't be talking English. It's not our nature. We like to talk in our language because it makes us happy. Onkwehonwenéha. It makes us feel light when we speak Onkwehonwenéha. So we had a hard time. And then they started to teach of writing and reading. It was very difficult. But we were able to go through that. I am thankful. I am so grateful personally that I did not never lose my language. I always could go home at the end of the day and my mother would welcome me and I'd transfer my thinking and no English came in the house. That English stays in the doorway. You pick it up on your way back to school the next day in the house. Onkwehonwenéha ausku. Always Onkwehonwenéha. So I had this great fortune and I consider myself, and those of you who speak, you should recognize how lucky you are. So wadela suio. You're very fortunate. And then my father was a good storyteller. He was just he just enjoyed people coming, he was a barber. He cut his hair, and the old people would come and they would visit with him and they're talking all kinds of stories and all in our language. And I would sit there at the top of the stairs for hours on end listening to their wonderful stories about how the hay is growing or what they think what kind of a harvest they're going to have, and how the maple season went. All these beautiful things, all that they could work together. They used to have what they call in English bees, like they would come together to work together to harvest one man's field and haying, and then the next day, if they finished, they would go to the next farmer's field, and they all work together. De Gayanawago. And it was such a beautiful experience. It was all just happiness. Sununi. My mother was the same. My mother had a loving heart. And all the women in our neighbors would come and they would sit together. Maybe they're quilting a blanket or they're making baskets. And it's all just they had their own stories and they had their own life ways. And they're laughing and joking around and they're teasing each other. They like to tease each other and stuff like that. It was just all a bunch of happiness, all in Onkwehonwenéha. That's where you build your vocabulary. That's where you learn the words. That's where you figure out how to say it in a nice way so it doesn't offend anybody. You know, some people, when they hear something, they'll take offense to it. But in the language, it doesn't happen that way. You find a way to please their mind before you say what you don't agree with. It's an interesting concept. Anyway, I'm also very fortunate to have had elders, to have had, when I came to the Longhouse, I had a whole group of men sitting there, and they enjoyed my company. They would really, really be happy when I'm sitting there because they had somebody that they could teach, somebody they could look forward to who's going to pick this up, somebody who's going to do the announcements in council, or somebody who's going to remind people of protocol or the way things are done. And they looked at me for that, and I took great honor in that. I took great respect in that, and I learned the vocabulary. I learned the etiquette of democracy, how the Rodianesun, the title holders, would counsel. What is the proper mannerism? How do you enunciate an issue to cross the fire so that it lands on their ears softly across the fire? Imagine that. To speak softly, that it lands on their ears softly. Where in English do you ever hear anything like that? Anyways, I learned the vocabulary of Ganu Shuni Onwe, the way of the Longhouse. I was very, very fortunate to have had those Ludikstohugunga, the old people, the clan representatives, the men and the women. I had an opportunity to work with Gatnistasura, the women, so that there is proper conduct and so that there's proper procedure. I'm a very fortunate individual about that issue. And I learned, like, they would often call upon me. I don't know, they just felt that maybe I could do a good job to do what they're supposed to be doing. Anyway, when it came, there was one time, Dehaji Jakwa, the late Joe Mitchell, he took me aside and he said, I want to teach you something about birthing. Ne kati wahe ne ona ne unka ne ase an yago wilayanta ne ro skaragete toani jagotunwisa ne kati na ne deyoto huanchohum ne a sewanohetste ne to sadenu huerato ne gi owiraze ona kahnu wahsewe Gio mangiate, ne wa squa wajila esta. Ona gadi wahe, ne donquanu hueratunge, ne gadi anquanacta slunya ne quascana agahage. Tano ne ayaguando, ne olihuio umtoahe, ne tena sawitane, ne aguegune unque sua ayagoya dalina staqua. Ne ayagodela suioste ne kagyo kwaguego ji ona wa soe ganuni wanchate ne gadi wahe ne wa tkwanu waradunwe. This elder from the Turtle Clan said, I want to tell you something about when a woman has a baby. There are certain words you put through. He said, boy or girl, he says, you welcome them to this world. You are happy that they are born healthy, they are born beautiful, and you acknowledge that they have brought something very special to this family. They in their birth brings something very special to the people. We're sure of that. So you talk to the baby and you say those words. You welcome them and you say, enjoy the light of our eldest brother's sun. Enjoy the natural world and welcome. You are welcome to this family. You have a clan, you have a family, and you have lovingfulness. Nene luwanolongkwa. Luwanolongkwa. Kawaniyong. It's a beautiful word of lovingfulness, pure lovingfulness. And so it is. You're going to be bringing something special, and you are welcomed. Let's take a break.